He only wanted a place to sleep, but the widowed Apache women in town had other plans, Wild West. The wind was dry and sharp, carrying with it the faint smell of smoke from distant chimneys and the tang of horses' sweat. On that road a lone rider appeared, moving slowly. His horse was thin, its coat dull and dusty, and every step seemed heavier than the last. The man on the horse had not seen comfort for many days. His clothes were worn, his boots scuffed and torn, and a wide-brimmed hat shaded a face lined with fatigue and worry. His eyes, though tired, carried a gentle light, like someone who had seen hard times but had not lost hope. He rode with no clear plan, only a small satchel slung over his shoulder. Inside were a few belongings he had carried for months: a tin cup, a small loaf of bread, and a notebook filled with sketches of landscapes he had seen along the trail. Most nights he had slept under the open sky, with only the stars above and the cold earth below. But tonight he longed for a roof over his head, a bed that would let him rest without fear of storms or wild animals. As he entered the town, he noticed the buildings were small and made mostly of wood. Some were leaning slightly, showing years of exposure to the harsh weather. The streets were quiet, except for the occasional creak of a wagon wheel or the clatter of a horse's hoof. A few townspeople peeked from their windows or stood on the porches, watching the stranger. They whispered among themselves. It was unusual to see a newcomer, and even more unusual for someone to ride in so quietly without announcing his arrival. He slowed his horse and guided it to the side of the main street. His mind was already planning how to ask for a place to sleep. The first building he approached was a small inn, its paint faded and signs swinging in the wind. He opened the door carefully and stepped inside, the wooden floor creaking under his boots. The innkeeper, a stout man with a graying mustache, looked up from polishing a glass. "Even in, stranger," the innkeeper said, his voice cautious. "You need a room," the traveler nodded. "Just for the night, sir. I've been on the road for some time and I need somewhere safe to rest." The innkeeper frowned. "I'm sorry, but the inn's full tonight. We've got a shipment of travelers coming in from the north and every room is taken." He paused, studying the stranger. "You might try Miss Malia's place down by the edge of town. She and the other widows sometimes take in guests, but I can't promise anything." The traveler thanked him politely and stepped back into the sunlight. He had heard of women who ran boarding spaces for travelers, but it was rare. Most places in the Wild West were run by men or families. Still, the thought of a safe place to sleep gave him a small flicker of hope. As he walked, he noticed a group of women at the edge of town. They were gathered near a modest cluster of cabins, shaded by tall cottonwood trees. Their clothing was simple but clean, and their expressions were calm yet watchful. The traveler slowed his pace and gave a small nod in greeting. One of the women, older than the others but with sharp eyes and a steady posture, stepped forward. "You look tired," she said gently. Her voice was soft, yet carried a strength that made the traveler pause. "I am," he admitted. "I've been traveling for many days, and I just need somewhere to rest tonight." She studied him carefully, her eyes taking in his worn clothes, the dirt on his boots, and the way he leaned slightly on his horse. "We can offer you shelter," she said finally. "Our cabins are simple, but you will be safe here. We do not take in many strangers, but something about you tells me you mean no harm." Relief washed over the traveler, and he nodded gratefully. "Thank you, I don't ask for much, just a place to sleep and maybe a warm meal." The woman smiled faintly. "You will get both. Come, we will show you." She led him along a narrow path that wound through the trees. As they walked, the traveler noticed the quiet strength of the group. The other women moved with purpose, tending small gardens, repairing fences, and carrying baskets of laundry. Even in the harshness of life on the frontier, there was an air of calm and dignity about them. When they reached a modest cabin, the woman opened the door and gestured inside. "This will be your room," she said. The cabin was small but clean, with a simple bed, a wooden table, and a chair. Sunlight streamed through a small window, casting warm patterns on the floor. For the first time in weeks, the traveler felt a sense of peace. He dismounted his horse and loosened his hat, letting out a deep sigh. "Sit," the woman offered, pulling a chair close to the table. "You must be hungry." The traveler hesitated, then nodded. She and the other women brought out a simple meal: bread, dried meat, and a small pot of stew. They ate together quietly at first, sharing glances and gentle smiles. The traveler tried to speak, but words felt awkward after so many lonely days. The women, sensing his hesitation, spoke softly of the town and its small routines. "This town is quiet," one of the younger women said. "Not much happens, but we make do. Life here is not easy, but it is steady." The traveler nodded, taking in their words. He felt a strange mix of awe and gratitude. These women, who had faced hardships of their own, were offering him kindness without asking for anything in return. For a man who had mostly seen suspicion and fear on the road, this was a rare gift. As night fell, the fire in the cabin flickered warmly, casting shadows that danced along the walls. The traveler sat by the fire, listening to the soft murmur of the women as they finished their chores and prepared for bed. The sound of their quiet laughter and gentle conversation filled the cabin with a feeling he had long forgotten: safety. When it was time to sleep, the traveler lay down on the simple bed. His body ached, but it was the kind of tiredness that could finally rest. He closed his eyes and thought of the road he had traveled, the lonely nights, the harsh sun, the endless miles. And now, for the first time in a long time, he thought of a place where he could rest without fear, a place where strangers could become friends. Outside, the wind continued to blow through the trees, carrying the soft creak of branches and the faint sounds of night animals. But inside the cabin, there was warmth, safety, and the quiet hum of life continuing despite all hardships. The traveler drifted into sleep, not knowing what the next days would bring, but feeling, for the first time in a long time, that perhaps he had found a small piece of home in the heart of Silver Creek. The next morning, the traveler woke to the soft light of dawn spilling into the cabin. He stretched, feeling the stiffness in his muscles from the long ride the day before. For the first time in many weeks, he felt rested. The cabin smelled faintly of wood smoke and herbs, a comforting scent that reminded him of simpler days long gone. Outside, he could hear the quiet stirrings of the town, the clatter of hooves on wooden planks, the low murmur of voices, and the occasional caw of a crow. He dressed quickly, pulling on his worn shirt and patched trousers, and stepped outside. The sun was rising over the horizon, casting golden light over the small settlement. The cabins of the widows were modest but well kept, each surrounded by small gardens where vegetables and herbs grew in neat rows. The traveler noticed one woman, younger than the rest, kneeling by a patch of tomatoes, carefully examining the plants. Another carried a basket of firewood, balancing it expertly on her hip. The leader, Malia, approached him quietly. Her eyes, sharp yet kind, met his. "You slept well?" she asked. "Yes," he replied, his voice still rough from sleep. "Better than I have in weeks. Thank you for letting me stay here." Malia nodded. "You are welcome, but we do not take in guests just for comfort. We expect help in return." "Life is hard here, and we all work together." The traveler smiled faintly. He had expected nothing more than a place to rest, but he had no objections. "I can help. Tell me what needs to be done." She glanced around, gesturing toward the small settlement. "The fences need repair, the firewood must be chopped, and there is always work in the garden. You can start with whatever seems easiest." He nodded and walked toward the tool shed. The first task he took on was chopping firewood. The sun was already high in the sky, and the sweat ran down his face as he swung the axe. Each strike sent splinters of wood flying, and the rhythm of the work cleared his mind. It had been years since he had performed such labor, but the simple, steady motion was satisfying. When he looked up, one of the widows was watching him, a faint smile on her face. "You do that well," she said. "Most men we see around here are clumsy with an axe. You seem to know what you're doing." The traveler wiped the sweat from his brow. "I have learned from necessity," he said. "There is little choice but to learn quickly out on the road." The woman nodded, as if understanding him better than most. "You will fit in here if you keep that attitude," she said lightly before turning to continue her own work. The morning passed with the traveler moving from task to task. He helped repair a section of the wooden fence that had been damaged by the wind. He carried water from the nearby well and swept the dirt paths. The widows worked alongside him, guiding him gently but allowing him to take responsibility for the labor. Slowly, they began to speak more freely, telling him about the town and their lives. Malia, noticing his curiosity, sat down beside him on a bench for a brief rest. "We have all lost much," she said quietly. "Our husbands, our families, our homes, but we survived. That is why we are careful with strangers. Trust is earned here, not given freely." The traveler listened, fascinated. He could feel the weight of their words, the quiet strength of people who had endured hardships far greater than his own. "I understand," he replied. I have known loss too, though perhaps not as yours. I have been alone for a long time. That is why your kindness surprises me. Malia smiled faintly. Kindness is not surprising here once you know us, but we do watch and we do test. It is the way of life in a place like this. Survival depends on understanding who you can rely on. By midday, the traveler had begun to feel a strange sense of belonging. The widows did not treat him as an outsider. Instead, they offered guidance, shared stories, and sometimes even gentle teasing that made him laugh. For a man who had spent weeks alone on the trail, it was a relief to hear friendly voices and feel welcomed. After the midday meal, which was simple but hearty, Malia called him aside. "If you are to stay here longer, there is more to learn than just physical work," she said. "This settlement has its routines and rules. You will need to observe and participate. It is how we keep peace among ourselves." The traveler nodded, feeling both nervous and eager. He had only intended to rest for one night, but now he realized that this small place offered something he had not expected, a chance to be part of a community. He spent the afternoon helping the women tend their gardens, planting seeds and pulling weeds. The soil was hard and stubborn, but with careful effort, they coaxed life from it. As they worked, they shared stories of past hardships and moments of joy, laughter mingling with the steady rhythm of labor. One of the younger widows, a woman named Leora, showed him how to prune the tomato plants properly. "You must be gentle," she said, guiding his hands. "Too rough and the plant will not bear fruit. Life is often like that, delicate, and yet strong if treated with care." The traveler nodded, struck by the simplicity and wisdom of her words. He realized that the lessons he was learning here were different from the lessons on the trail. Out in the wild, survival had been about speed, cunning, and endurance. Here, survival was about patience, cooperation, and understanding the needs of others. As evening approached, the group gathered near the fire once again. The traveler felt a warmth in his chest, a sense of connection he had not known in years. They spoke quietly of the day's work and of small dreams for the future, plans for better fences, larger gardens, and celebrations when the harvest came. The traveler listened, absorbing each story, and occasionally contributed his own thoughts, careful not to overstep. That night, as he lay on the simple bed in his cabin, he thought about the day. He had come seeking nothing more than a place to sleep, yet he had found something unexpected, a community that valued work, honesty, and kindness. He realized that his journey had brought him not just to a town, but to a place where he might belong, even if he was still a stranger in some ways. The moon rose over Silver Creek, casting a soft glow on the cabins and gardens. The sounds of the night were gentle, the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of an owl, and the low murmur of voices as the women finished their evening chores. The traveler felt a sense of peace he had not known for a long time. The hardships of the trail seemed distant now, replaced by a quiet hope that perhaps, in this small town and among these women, he had found a place where he could begin again. Sleep came easily that night, deeper and more restful than he had experienced in months. And as he drifted off, he knew that tomorrow would bring more work, more stories, and perhaps more connections that would slowly weave him into the life of Silver Creek. What had started as a simple quest for shelter had become something far more significant, the first step toward a new life he had never imagined. The days in Silver Creek began to blend together for the traveler, though each one was filled with new sights, sounds, and lessons. The sun rose early, and the town seemed to wake with it. Birds chirped in the cottonwood trees, and the smell of fresh bread and herbs floated from the cabins. The traveler now moved among the widows as naturally as he had moved along dusty trails, carrying water, repairing fences, or tending the small gardens. Each day he learned something new about life in this quiet settlement, and slowly the bonds between him and the women deepened. At first, the widows had been cautious. They had seen many strangers over the years, men who arrived for comfort or food, then left without notice. But this traveler was different. He worked alongside them without complaint, he listened carefully when they spoke, and he showed a quiet respect for their home. Over time, they began to trust him. Malia, the leader, watched him closely, noting the way he treated each woman with kindness, never speaking harshly or acting impatiently. One morning, as he helped carry a large basket of harvested vegetables from the garden, Leora smiled at him. "You've become part of the rhythm here," she said. "You no longer stumble or hesitate. You know where things go and how we do them." The traveler paused, setting the basket down. "I never expected to learn so much," he admitted. "When I came here, I only wanted a place to sleep. I did not think I would find this." He gestured vaguely to the town, the cabins, and the women around him. "A place where people work together and care for one another," Leora nodded. "It is not easy. Life here is simple, but simple does not mean easy. Everything we have, we build with our own hands, and everyone must contribute, even strangers, if they wish to stay." By midweek, the traveler found himself taking on tasks that went beyond simple labor. He began helping with hunting small game for meals, learning from the widows how to track and set traps. Though he had experience surviving in the wilderness, he had never done so alongside people who relied on each other so closely. He began to appreciate how their skills, knowledge, and patience had kept this small community alive for so many years. It was during one of these afternoons that something unexpected happened. The traveler was repairing a section of fence near the edge of the property when he noticed one of the widows, Rena, watching him quietly. She had been silent much of the day, working on her garden, but now her gaze lingered longer than before. He looked up and gave a polite nod, and she returned it with a small smile. For a moment, the air seemed different, warmer, lighter. The traveler felt a strange stirring in his chest, a sense of connection he had not expected. The days continued in this way. The traveler became more skilled in tasks he had once struggled with, and the widows began to rely on him in ways they had not before. They spoke more freely around him, telling stories of the past, tales of the husbands they had lost, the struggles of living on the frontier, and the little joys they had found despite hardships. He listened quietly, sometimes offering words of sympathy, sometimes just nodding and letting them speak. Slowly, he realized that he was not just a guest here. He was becoming part of their lives. One evening, as the sun began to set and painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, the traveler joined Malia and Leora by the fire. They had finished the day's work and were now sharing tea from a small pot, the steam curling into the cool evening air. The traveler sipped quietly, watching the flames flicker, feeling the comfort of companionship. "Malia," he said after a moment, "I did not think it would be like this. I expected only a bed and a meal, but this feels like something more. Something I have been missing for a long time." Malia studied him carefully, her eyes serious but kind. "You have known loneliness," she said. "We all have in one way or another, but life in Silver Creek is not about loneliness, it is about connection. You may not have realized it before, but you are beginning to understand that." The traveler nodded slowly. "I am beginning to, and I do not want to leave. I did not know this place could feel like home, but it does." Malia smiled faintly, the lines on her face softening. "Then perhaps it is not only us who have something to gain," she said. "Perhaps you too have something to give." As the days passed, the traveler began to notice small changes in the widows' behavior toward him. Their glances lingered longer, their smiles were warmer, and the teasing moments became more frequent. It was subtle, nothing rushed, but he could sense the growing affection and admiration. He realized that the women, who had been cautious and guarded for so long, were beginning to see him not just as a guest, but as someone who might belong here permanently. One afternoon, as he worked on repairing a broken wheelbarrow, Malia came to him with a thoughtful expression. "You work hard," she said, "and you care. That is rare. Most men who pass through do not stay long enough to show either." The traveler set down his tools, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "I do not want to be like most men," he said. "I want to belong somewhere. I want to be part of something real." Malia nodded. "Then perhaps Silver Creek has found its way to you as much as you have found your way here." By now, the traveler had grown accustomed to the rhythm of life in the town. He woke with the sun, worked with the women through the day, and rested beside the fire at night. He knew the small paths, the gardens, the cabins, and even the habits of the widows. Each woman had her own strengths and personality, and he had come to appreciate each of them in different ways. Leora's gentleness, Rena's quiet strength, and Malia's wisdom all left impressions on him that he had never expected when he first rode into town. One evening, as they sat together after finishing the day's work, Rena spoke softly, almost to herself. "We were so alone before, and now it is as if a missing piece has returned." The traveler glanced at her, and she looked at him, a gentle understanding in her eyes. He felt a warmth spread through his chest, a recognition that the bond between them was deepening. The traveler realized that life in Silver Creek was not just about shelter or survival. It was about trust, care, and shared experiences. It was about learning to work alongside others, to share burdens, and to find joy in simple moments. And most unexpectedly, it was about connection, the kind that made a person feel seen, valued, and welcome. That night, as he lay on his bed, he reflected on the weeks he had spent in the town. What had started as a simple quest for a place to sleep had grown into something far more profound. He was no longer just a stranger. He was part of a small, resilient community. The widows had offered him kindness, guidance, and friendship, and he had given them his respect, labor, and quiet companionship. Together, they had created a rhythm of life that was gentle yet strong, simple yet deeply meaningful. Sleep came easily that night, but his mind lingered on the events of the day. He thought of the women who had watched him, guided him, and slowly accepted him into their lives. He thought of the fences he had repaired, the gardens he had tended, and the meals he had shared. And he thought of the quiet realization that he was no longer alone, that in this small, dusty town, he had begun to find a place where he truly belonged. The wind rustled through the trees outside, carrying the soft night sounds of Silver Creek. Inside the cabin, the traveler felt a sense of calm and contentment. He did not know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt hope. The journey that had brought him here was not yet over, but he knew that whatever lay ahead, he had found a place of warmth, trust, and connection. And that, he realized, was worth more than any road he had traveled alone. Life in Silver Creek had settled into a steady rhythm for the traveler, but even the quietest towns could not escape the whispers of curiosity and jealousy. Word had begun to spread among some of the men in town that a stranger had arrived and was living among the widows. It started as small murmurs in the saloon, then grew into cautious glances on the street, and finally into hushed conversations at the edges of gatherings. Most of these men had seen the strength and independence of the widows and had long respected them, but they could not help but feel uneasy at the presence of someone who seemed to have found a place in their world so quickly. The traveler, however, remained unaware of the growing tension. His days were full of work and learning, and he continued to spend time with the widows, helping with chores, tending the gardens, and repairing fences. He had grown particularly close to Malia, the leader, who guided him with patience and wisdom. Leora and Rena also enjoyed his company, often speaking with him as they worked side by side. Small gestures, quiet smiles, and shared laughter had become a natural part of their interactions. One afternoon, while carrying a load of firewood to the cabins, the traveler noticed a group of men watching him from across the street. Their eyes were sharp, and their expressions carried a mixture of suspicion and resentment. He felt a small pang of discomfort but tried to ignore it. After all, he had come seeking only a place to stay, not trouble. Still, the tension could not be avoided. That evening, as the traveler and the widows sat by the fire sharing a simple meal, Malia spoke quietly, her voice serious. "Not everyone in town is pleased with your presence," she said. "Some men see you as a threat or worse, a distraction. You must be careful." The traveler looked up, concern flickering in his eyes. "I do not wish to cause trouble," he said. "I only want to be here to help and to belong, that is all." Malia nodded. "I know, but in Silver Creek, as in the world beyond, intentions are not always enough. You must be aware of how your actions may be perceived. We have worked hard to build this community, and we will not let it be disrupted." Over the next few days, the traveler became more conscious of the glances and whispers around him. Some townsmen would pass too close on the street, muttering under their breath, while others lingered near the cabins, watching his every movement. Though the widows continued to trust him, the traveler could feel the tension building outside their small circle. It was during this time that he also began to confront his own feelings. The widows' attention had been gentle at first, then growing warmer and more personal. He had come to care for each of them, not only for their kindness but also for their strength, their resilience, and their wisdom. Yet he felt a mix of guilt, fear, and uncertainty. He had never expected to feel this way toward people he had only recently met, and he worried about the implications of forming deeper bonds. One evening, after the day's work was done, the traveler found himself sitting with Malia on a small bench outside her cabin. The sun had dipped low, and the sky was painted with soft shades of orange and purple. The air was cool, and the faint scent of herbs and wood smoke lingered. "Malia," he began hesitantly. "I did not come here seeking companionship. I only wanted shelter, a brief rest from the road. But now, I feel something I do not understand fully. I feel connected and I feel needed. I do not know how to balance these feelings with the respect I owe you all." Malia listened carefully, her eyes steady on his face. "Feelings are not wrong," she said gently. "They are a part of being human, but understanding them takes time, and acting on them without thought can lead to complications. You have become part of our lives, yes, but you must decide whether you will remain here for the long term or continue to wander. There are choices, and each has consequences." The traveler nodded, absorbing her words. He realized that he could no longer pretend that his time in Silver Creek was temporary. He had found purpose, friendship, and even affection here. But he also understood that life in the town required trust, honesty, and careful thought. Decisions would have to be made, and they would affect not only him but everyone he had come to care about. The following morning, as he worked repairing the cabins, the traveler noticed subtle changes in the widow's behavior. Their glances were more searching, their smiles lingering. Leora laughed more freely when he shared small stories from his travels, and Rena offered him small tokens of appreciation, such as a freshly baked biscuit or a flower from her garden. Each gesture, while simple, carried deeper meaning, and the traveler could feel the warmth of their attention. Yet the tension from outside the circle persisted. One afternoon, a few townsmen confronted him near the edge of the settlement. "You don't belong here," one said, his tone sharp but not openly hostile. "This is our town and the widows are part of it. Don't think we'll welcome an outsider taking their attention." The traveler remained calm. "I mean no harm," he said firmly. "I am here only to work, to help, and to be part of this community. I respect these women and their lives, and I wish only to live peacefully." The men grumbled but eventually walked away, leaving the traveler to continue his work. He realized that even in a small town, people could be quick to judge, and that maintaining trust and respect required constant care. That evening, he sat again with Malia, sharing the events of the day. "They are wary of me," he said. "I do not know if I can change their minds." Malia shook her head gently. "You cannot control others, only yourself. Show them through your actions that you are honest, hardworking, and respectful. Over time, most people will see the truth. Do not let fear guide you, but be cautious, yes. That is all." The traveler spent the next days reflecting on her advice. He worked diligently, helped the widows with chores, and continued to strengthen the small bonds of trust and affection he had formed. Slowly, he began to understand that life in Silver Creek was not only about survival, but about careful, thoughtful living, knowing when to act, when to listen, and when to stand firm. As he observed the widows, he realized that they, too, were aware of the tension around them. Their care and attention toward him had grown, not from necessity, but from genuine connection. Each smile, each gentle word, and each shared task reflected trust built over time. The traveler began to recognize the depth of these relationships and the importance of acting with honesty and integrity. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned a deep shade of blue, the traveler walked along the path by the cabins. Malia joined him, and they walked side by side in silence, the air calm and still. Finally, she spoke. "You are at a crossroads," she said. "You can choose to leave when you wish, or you can choose to stay and make this place your home. Whatever you decide, it must be deliberate. The lives of many, including your own, are intertwined here now." The traveler nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He understood that this decision was not about fear or obligation, but about choosing where he truly belonged. He had come seeking shelter, but he had found something far greater, a sense of purpose, companionship, and a place where his efforts mattered. That night, as he lay on his bed, he thought about the days he had spent in Silver Creek. He remembered the work in the gardens, the repairs on the cabins, and the quiet conversations around the fire. He thought of the trust and affection of the widows, and of the challenges he had faced from outside the settlement. Most of all, he thought of the choice before him, whether to continue as a traveler, moving from place to place, or to embrace the community that had welcomed him and allowed him to belong. Sleep came slowly that night, as his mind weighed the possibilities. He realized that whatever he chose, he would no longer be the same man who had arrived weeks before, seeking only a bed for the night. He had been changed by the kindness, trust, and companionship of the widows, and he now understood that life offered more than survival. It offered connection, meaning, and the chance to be part of something larger than oneself. The days in Silver Creek were quiet now, but for the traveler, every moment carried the weight of a decision he could no longer avoid. The town had grown familiar to him. The cabins, the gardens, the paths through the cottonwood trees, all had become part of his daily life. He had found purpose in work, comfort in companionship, and a strange warmth in the laughter and smiles of the widows. But with each passing day, he knew he had to decide whether this would be a temporary stay or the beginning of a new life. One morning, he rose earlier than usual, the first light of dawn spilling over the horizon. He walked to the edge of the settlement, where the grass met the dusty road, and took a deep breath of the cool morning air. The quiet of the town was different now. It was not just silence, but a feeling of possibility. Birds chirped softly, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wood smoke and freshly tilled earth. For a moment, he let himself imagine what life could be if he chose to stay. Malia appeared behind him, her footsteps soft on the dirt path. She did not speak immediately, but stood quietly watching the sun rise with him. Finally, she said, "You have been thinking a lot." The traveler nodded. "I have," he admitted. "I came here seeking nothing more than a place to sleep, but I have found more than I expected. I have found work, friendship, and a sense of belonging, but I must decide if this is truly my home or if I am still a traveler at heart." Malia regarded him with quiet understanding. "Decisions like this are never simple, but you must choose with honesty, not fear. You cannot live fully in two worlds at once." The traveler spent the day working in the gardens, carrying water and tending the plants. He noticed the small ways the widows showed care for him, a smile when he completed a task, a shared joke during the work, a small gesture of kindness. Leora handed him a basket of ripe tomatoes with a gentle laugh. Rena offered him a biscuit still warm from the oven, and Malia guided him as he repaired a section of the fence. Each act reminded him of the bonds he had formed and the trust they had placed in him. As evening approached, the traveler realized that he could no longer delay his decision. He had grown to care for the widows deeply, and he had come to understand the rhythm of life in Silver Creek. The town, once just a stop along a long journey, had become a place where he mattered, not as a guest, but as part of the community. He called the widows together by the fire, and they gathered with quiet curiosity. The sun had set, casting a warm glow over the cabins and gardens. The traveler's heart raced, but he felt a calm determination beneath it. He spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. "I came here looking for shelter," he began. "I did not know I would find so much more. Your kindness, your trust, and your friendship have changed me. I have learned that life is not only about survival, but about connection, care, and the bonds we share with others. I have come to realize that Silver Creek, and all of you, are now my home." The widows listened quietly, their eyes reflecting the firelight. There was a pause, a stillness that carried the weight of the moment. Then Malia spoke, her voice calm but filled with warmth. "You have shown your worth through your actions, your respect, and your care. You have become part of our lives. We accept you not as a guest, but as family." Leora smiled softly. "We have been lonely for many years, each of us in our own way, but you have shown us that trust and companionship can return. We are glad you are here." Rena nodded, her eyes shining. "You have worked hard, cared for us, and shared your kindness freely. You belong here if you choose to stay." The traveler felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in months, he felt a complete sense of peace. He realized that this choice was not just about where he lived, but about who he wanted to be. He wanted to be part of this community, to contribute to their lives, and to share in the small joys and hardships of their everyday existence. Over the next few days, the traveler began to settle into his new role fully. He helped with repairs on cabins, tended the gardens, and assisted with hunting small game for the meals. But now his actions carried a deeper meaning. He was no longer just performing tasks. He was building a life, creating bonds, and sharing responsibility for the well-being of the community. The townspeople, who had initially whispered and watched from a distance, began to notice the harmony between the traveler and the widows. The jealousy and suspicion slowly faded as they saw the genuine respect and care he showed. Even the men who had confronted him began to understand that he was not a threat, but someone who had earned his place through effort and character. One afternoon, as the traveler and Malia repaired the fence along the edge of the settlement, he spoke quietly. "I did not expect life to bring me here," he said. I thought I would be wandering forever, but now I see that a home is not just a place. It is the people who care, the trust that is shared, and the life we build together. Malia nodded, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the afternoon sun. You have learned well, home is not given, it is created, and you have helped create something strong here. This is why you belong. As weeks turned into months, the traveler became an inseparable part of Silver Creek. He rose with the sun, worked through the day, and shared quiet evenings by the fire with the widows. Together they celebrated small victories, a new section of fence completed, a bountiful harvest from the garden, or the laughter of a shared joke. Life was still hard in the frontier town, but it was now filled with companionship, purpose, and hope. One evening, under a sky filled with stars, the traveler sat with the widows near the fire. The air was cool, and the distant sound of owls and the rustling of trees created a peaceful backdrop. He looked around at the faces that had become so important to him, Malia, Leora, Rena, and the others, and he realized that he had found something he had never thought possible, a family built not by blood but by trust, care, and shared life. "Thank you," he said softly, "for welcoming me, for trusting me, and for showing me that a home can be more than a place to rest. It can be where hearts belong." Malia smiled, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "We are the ones who should thank you. You came into our lives with respect, kindness, and honesty. You have proven that you belong not only here, but with us." The traveler felt a deep sense of contentment as he watched the firelight flicker across their faces. He understood now that the journey that had brought him to Silver Creek was not just a physical one, but a journey of the heart. He had left the road behind, not because it was forced upon him, but because he had chosen a life filled with connection, purpose, and belonging. Life continued in Silver Creek with its daily tasks, small challenges, and quiet triumphs. But for the traveler, each day was now richer, filled with meaning beyond simple survival. He had found a place where he was needed, where he could care for others, and where he could be part of something lasting. And in that small, dusty town, under the vast sky of the frontier, he finally understood what it meant to have a home, not just a roof over his head, but a life intertwined with the people who had accepted him, trusted him, and shared their world with him. For the traveler who had only wanted a place to sleep, Silver Creek had given him far more: a family, a community, and the knowledge that he had found his place in the world. And as he lay down that night, the stars shining above and the soft murmur of life around him, he knew that he would never be alone again.